Parents put me on violin. He goes, but you play cello, so there you go. Like, all right, ready when you are, kids.
We're live.
Okay. Well, sorry we are running late. We had to make coffee. Just
Very important.
It's very important. But if you're joining us, if you've been patiently waiting for us to get started, thank you. I appreciate that. For those of you here, thanks while we were making coffee for hanging out. So today is chapter 2, The Faces of the Monster. Hopefully you were able to read through it. It was not as lengthy of a chapter, but it was every bit packed with information. And I actually had to read through it a couple times. I would read it and kind of take a couple notes and think, no, I'm chewing on that today and I'm going to read it one more time before I do the notes. So I was glad it was a short one since I needed to read it a few times or I wouldn't have got all the way through. So let's just quickly open with a word of prayer and then we'll get down to it. So, Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to gather, be it at home, be it right here in person, be it in a few days when someone's schedule allows them to jump on and rewatch. However that fits their life, Lord, we thank you for the way you orchestrate that. And thank you for just providing the opportunity to go through this book with others and bring hope, bring clarity. That's my desire. Bring healing above all and new strategies. Lord, we just ask that you lead this today with insight. Even as we go through it, Lord, I wrote down so many things that I felt you speaking. But if you have more to say, we're certainly wanting to be open to that, and we'll be attentive to it. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, so I'm just going to start out with the first 3 paragraphs. Just the very beginning of this chapter to get an idea about it. And left my glasses in the car, so I'll do my best to not stumble across everything. As you lift the covers to expose the monster and expose the lie, the inherent fear will start to brew. You will usually hear the flight message first. The monster will give you will have you feel less than embarrassed, fearful, resonating with the shameful aspects of the lie. You will shrink back. You will even find ways to be unworthy, not smart, not good, all to prove in a multitude of ways that the lie is the truth. You'll engage in self-sabotage and scratch your head wondering why you continue to do what you do. It won't make any logical sense. Some people shift to the flight response immediately. After fleeing the flight, they will feel they must prove the lie wrong. They will need to be better behaved, more productive, worthier, more important, smarter, prettier, etc. However, in trying to prove the lie wrong, they are simultaneously validating their belief in the lie. I began hunting my monster. Over the years, I noticed how the monster could be triggered or soothed. I noticed how sometimes I would shrink back and feel shame, and then how other times I was a bull in a china shop, proving how special I was. So just with the opening of that chapter, I'm hoping that started to stir thoughts of how to uncover your own monster, and that this chapter itself brought about insight. What are some of the patterns I see that repeat? What is it? And that's where I'm hoping to lead you today, and leave you with homework. So if you have pen and paper handy, great. If not, have a few. But it'll also be something you can rewatch, and I'll put things in the comments later today of the homework list of things to do. But hopefully, just that introduction to this chapter got gears turning about what causes those feelings, that fight or flight. When am I shrinking back? When am I charging forward? And Unfortunately, we don't always just have one lie. We might have multiple. But I would challenge you to focus on the one that seems most prevalent and work on the little ones later. Or I also guess, I suppose, if that's too scary for you, then start uncovering those little ones until you feel more empowered to hit the big one. So you have fight and you have flight. She says that flight usually comes first, just to flee, but then sometimes you'll decide to engage and fight against it. She brings up a third F, calling freeze. Now I'm going to tell you right now, that is me. I am a freeze more than a fight or a flight. I am the middle child peacemaker, so I'm not the fighter. But I also don't tend to run. I just freeze, sitting there thinking, really? And just pondering and stuck. And so this week I've tried to look at, why do I freeze and what keeps me. She lists out symptoms, like if you're not sure of which one of these you tend to lean towards and do first. She listed those out. We'll go over them. But not necessarily did she give reasons why you're one or the other first. But freeze is definitely my... I want to make sure that what I'm going to say is going to come out right, that I'm going to maybe act, not react to a situation, not burn a bridge that I can't repair later. So that all falls under that peacemaker child. And it falls under my personality in the Enneagram that we talked about as being a number 2. And a number 2, I brought the Enneagram stuff, is your helper, your servant, your need to help, but you're also a need to be needed. So, insights. Anybody want to offer anything on that?
I'm a freezer also. It is about procrastination for me, though. It's about, I don't have the emotional energy to deal with this now, so I'm just going to wait and hope it goes away. That's why I freeze. Running is so exhausting, and so is fighting. Ugh, I just don't have the energy for either one of them. So I'm just going to try to just hold still and pretend everything's fine. La la la, everything's fine, and hopefully it will be eventually, or the people will forget, what's going on. So that is definitely, that's my. For me, the most powerful insight in this chapter, which I don't want to jump ahead, but was just how sneaky these monsters are.
Oh, yes.
And you talked about it a little bit, where it's like, if I'm fleeing this number, or this monster, then it's defining me. If I'm fighting this monster, it's still defining me. It's not fighting me.
Right.
Or if I'm freezing, guess what? It's still defining me, because I'm living my life out of reaction to the monster. And that the sneakiness of it, that if it can't get you one way, it's going to get you another, is really, that's the hardest part for me.
So then you resonate with those who wait on the Lord. Well,
it's one of my favorite verses.
Yes. So but maybe I take that too far. The freeze. I'm waiting on the Lord.
I can do all things through one verse taken out of context.
Right. Exactly. But that's where we go. That's how our monster gets in there and gets a hold of us. I like what you said about I don't have the energy to fight. I don't have the energy. Procrastination, the emotional energy. Mm-hmm. And I was speaking to my sister on the phone this week, and she was just having a difficult work week. She's the only one in the office right now, and she's playing the role of everybody else who's gone and doing her own job. And somebody came and wanted to tell her something completely insignificant and wanted her entire attention over it, and was getting fussy that they weren't grabbing it. And she just said, I can't care about that right now.
Right.
I thought, what a great line.
I know that feeling.
Because, that's kind of self-relieving.
Yeah.
In a truthful moment, I can't care about that. It's not that it isn't something worth caring about, but at this moment, I can't. I've got to do this. Then I can circle back around. But when she said that, I was like, I'm tucking that away. I think I might have a moment of having to use that.
That has been a key relationship tool between my wife and I. When it is a real thing. I don't have the emotional energy to have this conversation in a healthy way. So, which she hates because she has all the emotional energy in the world, but I don't. And so it's like, I really can't talk about this right now. You won't get anything good out of a conversation with me about this right now. It's not going to happen. So, but the other thing is, because I'm a procrastinator, because I would gladly put this off forever, we've had to start talking about when we are going to talk about it. Like put a date on the calendar.
Right.
Okay, when are we going to talk about it? Because if we don't, then I'm just going to hide and be like, oh, she doesn't remember.
Yes. Okay, so that third one being freeze. You just do nothing. Let's talk about. She says in here that the third F of our response set, triggering our monster. Let's see, freeze. We are overwhelmed and not driven to prove the monster right or wrong, and so we freeze and we think, which is where fear lives, in our thoughts. So we freeze, but we still perseverate. We're still thinking about it. We're still toying with that in our mind and vacillating back and forth between the truth of it or the lie of it. And it's still sapping our emotional energy that we don't have to deal with it at the moment. But, and then she states how, fear lives in our minds, in our thoughts. And when we experience extreme fear, then, as we talked about in the last chapter, how that threatens our well-being, and are we going to live or die with that fear? So just examples of the different fight, flight, or freeze. If you're not sure where you lie or what a flight response is. Flight response. You're not wanting to engage in a conversation with smart people, needing to have everything planned out first, dreading speaking in front of groups, shrinking back from social gatherings, worrying about what people think, hesitating to try anything new, avoiding confrontation and growing resentful, avoiding mirrors at all costs. That would be signs you're in the flight mode, escaping, you're fleeing. Fight, having to always win. You know who those people are. They will, they'll just charge right in there. They have that unending emotional energy. That would be my sister, the one that says, I just can't care about that right now. She would be your fight response before the others. And I mean, no offense by that. She'll be watching. Needing to be right. Being driven to get straight A's in school. Seeking after perfect performance in reviews. Becoming a top money earner. Needing to have a perfect body, hair, makeup, fill in the blank for whatever other vanity thing you can think of. Becoming a workaholic. Exhibiting obsessive behavior. And freeze. This is where I live. Spending endless time scrolling social media. Not so much that. Watching TV or movies in a daze. Yes. Playing Candy Crush. Doing meaningless things to avoid thinking about what really needs to be done. Procrastinating. The meaningless thing. I have a meaningless box. I really do. When I need to just let the brain rest and I'm in a freeze mode and I'm overwhelmed or overloaded, I have a shoebox because I only allow myself so much time. I do put a boundary there. I have a shoebox of unsorted Legos that need to be categorized and sorted.
Wow.
There you go. But I just need to think of nothing else except what array is it? Is it a 1x1, a 1x5, a 2x4? What is it? Put it in its slot. What color is it? Is it a specialized Lego? And if I can gain some control in that area and organize some things, I can let the clatter and the chatter up here just kind of settle. And that's my freeze. But I could get really lost doing it. And then my 6-year-old totally undoes it. He needs something and just dumps every drawer until he finds it. And I'm right back to having my shoebox to resort again. So there you go.
You're kind of happy about it, right? When he moves everything.
No, I am so frustrated. I'm like, do you know how much time I spent? But I suppose, yeah, now
But
I'm.
if they're not messed up, you won't have that
Right.
shoebox.
Except I haven't gotten through all of them yet. So there's ones over here I've yet to sort because I'm still resorting. Yeah, it's sick. it's
I don't think so at all. I think that's a very healthy and productive way of
it's a.
managing that energy.
But I at least limited it. For a while, I just go sort, and I'm like, oh, I'm getting lost in time here. I need to make a limit. So it's a shoebox. It's not a large, not like my boys' work boots
It's fine.
box. it's a regular size shoebox. So, where anyone want to volunteer where they fall, where they see themselves most often?
Come on, everybody, speak up.
And on mine, you can put it in the chat. I'll look back.
I can see it.
Oh, then you can see it. Okay, well, I don't want to pressure anybody. Certainly don't.
I do.
Promise
you
me
need to talk, folks. You haven't said anything.
It is a book discussion.
Yeah. So where do you land? Somebody be brave.
I guess I do the meaningless things at work when I've got a project or something that I'm dreading or I'm stressed about doing. Then I'll just find the little things that I can do without hardly thinking about it because I just can't push myself that hard.
I can resonate with that. I also know sometimes when I have a big task, but I know I have other smaller ones, it's hard to focus on that big task and all the things that my monster tells me about that big task and whether or not I can really achieve it. So then if I go take care of the smaller ones that I know I can knock out of the way, one, it's off my brain and not circling through. And two, I now have proved to the monster, hey, I can do the big one because I've done these little ones, they kind of add up. And so then I start to build my own confidence and feel a little empowered by getting some of the smaller things, even though it seems completely illogical to do them out of order and why not just this one has a deadline. Just knock it out, get it done. Anyone else?
I find myself in the flight mode sometimes, but also the freeze. Being a middle child, you can definitely relate.
Yeah.
Kind of seeing life sometimes in a daze, not just watching a movie, but life before me in a daze, just to settle those emotions.
Yeah.
It's avoiding conflict.
Yep.
And maybe procrastinating facing a conflict for the sake of, I know I can't resolve it the way it should be resolved, so being in that freeze mode is a comforting area to be in, and avoidance is a very comfortable thing for me.
Right. So my first marriage was to another middle child. And we thought that'd be great. We're peacemakers, right? We're going to always be kind. We're going to always get along and we won't argue and we'll be seeking the best for each other. But we didn't know how to deal with hard stuff. We didn't know how to have a conversation because we didn't want to upset the other person. And so there was a lot of voids. Like we just didn't have those conversations and we just drifted. And it wasn't that we didn't care about one another. We just didn't want to upset the other person and make them think we didn't care. We did not know how to confront because we were always cooling. We were the cooler in the fight. and the peaceful place to go. So then if you're always the cooler, how do you start the argument? How do you start the conversation and get it going? And that's not the reason that the marriage ended. But we we had recognized that we're both peacemaker, middle child. It's an interesting dynamic. Okay, well, I'm going to jump ahead to page 57. She talks about in the her fight. She says, as it is for anything internal, there will never be enough external validation. Anybody catch that?
Mm-hmm.
There will never be enough external validation. And we'll start to talk about that. That's the part of this book I cannot wait that we get to, is the how it is that we feed this monster lies or evidence to support or to negate and disprove the lie. Where are we gathering that evidence and feeding it to the monster? She kind of mentioned that we're either, soothing it or, flaring it up and what to do when it happens. And it's really hard not to jump ahead to that portion of the book because it's pretty profound. And it was very eye-opening for me, and I really experimented with it and tested it. And it was pretty amazing. But yeah, there will never be enough external validation for what's going on internally. We will seek and seek and seek things of the world. So
It's that key statement from last time. You can never get enough of what you never really needed,
But you never
and that's a powerful insight. That's really good.
never really needed. So whatever that lie is, that really stuck with me this week. And I mentioned, write that down, put it on a sticky note as you read through the chapters and whatever, and just reflect back on that. And how do you tell yourself you don't really need that? I mentioned last week that part of my monster was that imposter syndrome, which we're going to get into here in just a second, and feeling inadequate to perform the job I'm doing. The root of that for me, though, and I'll give you insight to what my monster is that I'm currently dealing with. Well, because I mentioned that I've gone through this before, and I couldn't find my old notes, couldn't find my journal, and I'm not even sure what the monster was. I have some of my notes, but and that one was being loved. That was my monster, needing to be loved. Well, hello, number 2 here, and in the Enneagram, the helper, needing to be needed. And that kind of stemmed from, when she talked about this going back in your childhood, and my parents divorcing when I was not even quite 2. I was 14 months old, and I can remember watching my baby brother take his first steps. And we were in foster care. I was the only one that got to see that. So yeah, that need to be loved. But where that has gone, I think, is even deeper, or has a sister monster swirling around in there. As I mentioned, that we have more than one monster, and that is to be valued, to have a sense of value. And so, I lost where I was going with that. But, okay, so then needing to be loved. Well, I know I'm loved. When you get outside of that illogical, emotional state, there are plenty of ways of knowing. And if nothing else, it's been through my walk in faith, knowing through Christ how loved I am. And that has brought a lot of peace and a lot of answer to that. But okay, so value, or whatever your monster is, how do you have an identity outside of that monster? So that's where I hope that we're going to start peeling those layers back with this chapter. Some of the assignments I'm going to give this week are going to start taking a look at that. We've allowed our identity to be what our monster has created. How do we be without it? If we don't have that monster driving us, well, what are we? And how do we know that? Where do we gain that? So obviously with mind value, it's right next to helper or a need to be loved. So that need is fulfilled in my walk. And knowing I have value because God created me and created me for a purpose. But yeah, so that's the one I'm working on right now. That's the monster that gets me right now is value. That I bring something of value to the table. So page 58 talked about fearing or proving the monster. Let's see. I made a little note now if I can find it.
I've been reading it digital, so my pages don't
Oh,
grab a.
I never thought about that.
I'm gonna go grab a.
Okay, well there you go. If you're reading it digitally, we now know that pages do not line up, and I would not have any idea what page that is for you if you're reading it digitally. Maybe I wrote the wrong page. Oh, yeah. Page 60. Oh, okay, so page 60, I want to explain. Okay, so on page 58, she talks about fearing your monster or proving your monster to be true, and that either side of the coin, as Josh even mentioned, either side of the coin, we're still in alignment in agreeing with that monster. So she's talking about that on page 58, but over on 60, she says something. When her monster was getting the best of her, she had to kind of get away and get alone with her thoughts for a moment, and she contacted her son, and he tells her, Mom, you just got bit by the flight message. Both the fight and the flight. So for her, the fight was to prove you are special, and the flight, believing that you are not, are responses to the same lie. So here's the one that really kicked me. Special is the illusory antidote you never needed. So again, back to that, what you never needed. So you can take out special, because that's her monster, and tuck in your monster and finish that sentence. And then she writes in there, oh, you sneaky monster. So that, so now flipping back. So getting to page 60 kind of explains what she was talking about in page 58, provides an example there of how we do that, how we align on either side of the fence. We're aligning with that monster. But she's starting to recognize patterns. She's starting to recognize certain feelings and know that the monster has reared its head, is speaking to her, and then how to get away and let the logical side of her brain start to deal with the emotional side of her brain. Her note down here, we never really have a relationship with anyone else other than ourselves. But that felt really selfish. I thought, woo, ouch. It was. When we are consumed emotionally by keeping up the facade, fearing or proving our monsters lie, we can't fully give ourselves to others in our most important relationships. Can't truly hear another person. And she's so right. When we're so busy proving it or running from it, fear, the flight, or proving, which is the fight, we don't have the emotional energy to give to anyone else. We're completely consumed. And so then here we are in the freeze. That's me, don't have the energy because I'm so busy fighting this monster up here right now. And that felt really selfish to me.
I'm always thinking about my emotional gas tank. And this was another insight from my studies with the Enneagram, was because I'm 9 and 9s have the lowest amount of emotional energy. So we have the smallest emotional.
You're the
gas
Yugo.
tank. And right, yeah. That's been a minute. I haven't thought about that. But but my wife is an 8 and she has the largest one. She has the largest emotional gas tank. And so like recognizing that I'm gonna run out of emotional energy a long time before she does. And being able to talk, being able to express that. Like to recognize when it happens. Because for me that's this whole chapter. This whole chapter is about when being able to recognize when the monster is at work, right?
Right.
So when is that popping up? When am I responding to this monster that does not exist? This monster is an illusion.
Right.
When am I responding to this monster? Being able to figure that out. What are my warning signs? Because my warning signs are going to be different than yours.
Oh, absolutely.
My warning signs are going to be different from someone else's. And so being able to, and the monster is sneaky. Did I say this last time? The C.S. Lewis said that the greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince us he didn't exist.
Yes.
Right? That's so real because he's going to stay hidden as long as he can, and he's going to try and convince you that what you're doing is you. This is who you are, but it's not. You are either running from the monster, freezing because you feel threatened by the monster, or fighting because you feel threatened by the monster. But that monster is not real. It was never real.
Is an interesting thing you say that didn't connect last week when you said he's going to stay hidden as long as he can.
Yeah.
And then her title is The Monster Under the Bed. Well, when does the monster come out? When the lights are out.
Yep.
Hidden under your bed. During the day, you play in your room all day long on the floor as a kid with the lights on, and you're not concerned at all about the monster that's under there.
Then the lights go out. But I loved her son's insight. I thought that was so great because the story is, she's at this thing that she had dreaded to even go to because she had been disconnected from this group of people for a while. And the whole time she's there, everybody's coming up and telling her how special she is, which should have made her feel amazing.
Right.
Because that's her monster, right? But no, these monsters don't ever let you feel good. That's nope. And so she actually was feeling terrible. And the more people told her how special what she was, the more terrible she felt, and she couldn't figure out what the problem was. This should have been a great shining moment for me, and I couldn't enjoy it.
Right?
What's going on? And her son was just like, that's still the monster. It's still that, But you're running instead of fighting, And man, I just thought that was such a really keen insight.
It was. So when she talked with her son and she had written about that, as much as I thought, that was great, he had insight, it actually was something that gave me relief from something that I felt guilt over, which is I go to my son a lot, my oldest, my 26-year-old, and I think, these are not kid matters. This is adult. Why am I talking to my son about this and putting this weight on his shoulders? But he's a fabulous sounding board. He really is a fabulous sounding board. And I always backpedal. I'm like, okay, after I blurt it out there, I'm like, you know what, I shouldn't, we just could stop the conversation. I shouldn't have brought this to you. But then he engages anyway and says, and I say it genuinely, I'm not saying that like as a passive aggressive thing, like, if I say that, well, then he will engage. I really mean it. We can stop. And he's like, actually, and he'll answer. So knowing that she goes to her son and he's a great sounding board, I was like, oh, so it is okay. It gave me permission for all those years that I felt bad about going to my son for things that I felt maybe really weren't his business or shouldn't be laid on him to guide and direct. But he's a pretty mellow guy.
No, I also think that speaking as a firstborn son, I don't know, most of the firstborn sons I know are mirrors of their mom.
Oh. Well,
what's funny about that? You got to share now.
Uh-huh.
I just picked it out, Joe.
Would you say I'm right?
I don't know.
You just just gotta forget that the stupid camera's there and just share.
It's just your voice. They don't know who you are. I didn't give a list of attendance. That's, so you will see
But,
that.
you know, because I have that relationship with my mother, and I know a lot of other firstborn sons that do also. That we just have this intrinsic understanding. I think part of it, though, is firstborn sons were probably born right at the height of when mom was at the mercy of her monster. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Um,
Well, and age-wise, just at the beginning of the critical thinking brain kicking in to start analyzing.
Usually that's about the time, and I think that's probably part of it too. Is in a way that's been, you've shared a monster for a long time.
Right. Right. So that imposter syndrome, you know, that I mentioned as my monster last week is really more of a trap or a scheme.
Yes.
You know, it's what the monster uses to keep me engaged and keep me believing the lie. Let's see, back over to 60 where she says, I have learned to observe my reactions and not believe them. Oh, if we could just, when we feel ourselves reacting, if we could just step back a minute and go, I don't believe that. Wait a minute, let's just look at that. Why am I reacting instead of acting? What triggered? What's the chatter happening up here? Because I don't know about everybody. There's always something speaking up here. It's never silent. I do know men have a little bit of a different gift of compartmentalizing and having a nothing box. And when you ask them, what are they thinking, and they say nothing, it's probably really true. And it's nothing wrong with it. I think they kind of have to have some times where they think of nothing because they balance so much on their shoulders as men of the house, as leaders, as warriors. Boy, whenever just that stays in that box. It doesn't come over here. And to have the emotional capacity to be able to open those boxes when necessary, you need a nothing box where they can just, nothing happens. Nothing is sapping them of any energy, and they can just float there for a while. Maybe even refuel, yeah.
Can you tell me how to respond when Teresa asks me, what are you thinking? And I'm in that nothing box.
Tell her exactly that. I'm in my nothing box right now.
I'm there all the time.
So then follow it up.
But as a woman, you want to respond, correct?
Right. So then I guess as a woman, when you say, well, I'm in my nothing box, you can follow up with, what box should I shift to? Where do you need me to go? And then we can let you know which box to open. And you might need some time to come out of your box. You need a little minute to
So I get the interpretation. I get the interpretation like I don't care. I don't have the feelings to respond properly,
Right.
and I'm pushing away. That's when I say I'm not thinking of anything right now.
So I've done some work with this nothing box. And when they're in their nothing box, it isn't that they don't care. It isn't that, and if they're in their nothing box, what we're saying to them is that is a very soundproofed, protected box. So what we're saying is going all around it and not penetrating that box. So it's not that they are not listening to us and that they do not care and that they do not hear us. They're protected from it.
I feel like I have the fear of I'm going to give the wrong response.
Sure.
So it's safe to be there because the response might not be the one that she wants to hear.
Right.
So is that fight or flight or freeze?
I freeze.
There you go.
So you got to have
It's
some
safe.
time. Yeah, that's a conversation you'll have to have. You have to have some time to come out of your box,
Yeah.
so you can then re-engage, and that may require patience and willingness to repeat what was said because they were in the nothing box
Amen.
when you said it.
Yeah. My
And-
wife contends with me on a regular basis that the nothing box isn't real. And I'm going, yes, it really is. This is a real state of mind that I go to, and because I'm the kind of person that I am, I'm doubling down on the nothing box because I'm a freezer. The nothing box is my house. Yeah, that's where I live, and so it just is. And I go there all the time, and it does require effort, and it really does to leave the nothing box and attend to what's going on. And so my request of my wife has been, would you kindly get my attention and say, I need you to listen to me, or whatever, just let me know you need my attention before you start saying what you need me to hear.
Right.
Because it's very annoying to her to repeat herself, which I totally understand.
But
I get that.
would feel
When
It
you
would
raise
annoy me
children,
too.
all you do is
if
repeat
I'm
yourself.
saying I need your attention right now, I would feel like I'm being really controlling in it.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But would that be helpful for you to get that kind of notification?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's not a controlling thing at all. It
See,
isn't that we don't want to give you our attention. That's not it. It's just that, our attention's on standby right now. And I have to be able to unclick this button and click the next one before I can actually turn my attention towards you.
but the fear you have is coming out of the nothing box, that you don't move to the fight side. No, seriously, that's what you don't want, is to verbally say something
Yeah.
that could trigger the emotion. Well, I know what you were thinking. You weren't in the nothing box. You were thinking this.
Yeah.
That's very frightening to come up
Sure.
to verbalize something that's not really true, but you're trying to express.
That is, yeah. Well, I think that, and that too comes from, which we're kind of maybe left the monster conversation behind, but maybe not. But the whole thing is the difference between how men and women communicate too is a really big thing, because women communicate by inference most of the time, so that they don't speak directly. They talk around it, and they expect
Expect you to get it.
they expect you to put those pieces together.
Right.
And if another woman were to speak directly to them, that's pretty aggressive. They wouldn't appreciate that. It would not feel great. But men almost always speak directly, and we don't understand the inference game. You really don't. And so when we're speaking to you, we actually mean exactly what we say. Do you disagree?
No, that's the absolute truth.
You know,
So you
And then
choose
you
your
have to
words
explain
wisely,
yourself.
right?
Then you have to explain yourself of what you just said.
Right.
And I didn't really mean that. Yes, you did mean that. Oh, okay.
I had this kind of a conversation with my wife last night. We had like a date night with some friends, and we were having a conversation on the way home, and she heard a whole lot of stuff that I was not saying. She heard a whole lot of things that were not coming out of my mouth at all. And I was like, can we back up, and can you just listen to the words I'm saying and don't add anything to them?
Right.
Just this sentence. This is all I'm trying to say. So please don't hear whatever else you're hearing. Just realize that comes from you, not from me, and which is hard to do. It's really hard for her to do, and I don't know that all women are that way and all men do that. I don't want to paint with that kind of a broad brush, but in my experience, that's largely true. That women are much less direct about the way that they communicate, and men are much more direct.
Right.
And so we cross each other on that, because women hear a man say a whole lot of things that were never anywhere around near his head with what he's saying.
Well, it's easy to do that, to say, well, you must be saying this because you're thinking that.
Right,
too.
right.
You know,
Right. Well, but see, the opposite is also true. You're saying a bunch of things. You're not saying what you want me to hear. You're saying you're giving me the clues I need to arrive at what you want me to hear. And I'm not good at that either. So this isn't just a one-way problem. This is a two-way problem for sure.
Right.
And both men and women are like, well, if you could just say it the way I say it.
Right.
But that's not really fair either way. We need to
That's-
learn to speak each other's language and recognize how that works, and it's hard.
It's asking the left-hander to write right-handed and the right-hander to write left-handed.
Absolutely.
I've been through a study on that. And that's incredible in what that does to your emotional capacity to manage anything else. And when you're expected to operate outside of that, it is just a complete drain so much faster. And then you can't even be there emotionally to do what's being asked. So,
Well, it's like, there's about 5 or 6 keys that I can play guitar in for hours and hours and then I never get tired. But if you ask me to play in F or in
E flat.
well, E flat, if you ask me to play in chords that I don't have muscle memory for,
Right.
I tire out really fast.
Yeah.
I can do it. I know those chords, but I just don't play them very often. And so I get exhausted very quickly. My fingers just wear out because I'm doing things that I haven't built the muscle memory there. And it's really hard. And this is one of the key issues that my wife and I have to move through, that I try and talk to a lot of, premarital counseling couples about. Like, this is something you need to understand. You don't communicate the same way. And so.
And it's
you need to-
awareness.
It is.
Half the game is being aware, and then having that conversation like we just are. Okay, so you need time to come out of that box. You don't want to come out in the fight response. And so what's the best approach? You'll know the best approach. So being receptive on the other end to what he's saying is the best approach, and trying and knowing that may need tweaking even. Give it a shot and then, this worked kind of, and tweak it. And yeah, it's all monster driven. So whether or not we're specifically talking there, it derives from our monsters. We operate from that. So,
Mason, you're awfully quiet.
you are okay, quiet. But you talked a lot last week. We'll give you grace. But is any of this hitting for you?
I think I'm mostly a flyer, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Talking about the marriage thing, I'm single, I've never been
Correct.
married, but I grew up with a single mother.
Mm.
So I think I tend to think more like a woman in a lot of ways. I don't know.
Sure. She imparted a lot of that on you, I'm sure. And siblings? You do
Yeah,
have
one older brother.
Right.
Which, the thing about older brothers act more like their mothers, I don't know
You
about
don't think
that.
so? That's
No.
not true.
That would know.
I tend to act more like my mom,
Sure.
and my brother acts more like our dad.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. The exception proves the rule. That's how I feel. There's always going to be none of the stuff that we're saying is 100% right.
Mhm.
There's always going to be wiggle room.
So she went on to talk about our identity, and we hit on it a little bit last week, how our monster develops in us a set of skills. In that fight response, we're developing a skill set to prove that monster wrong. And that in itself can be beneficial, but it can also be dysfunctional. In our fleeing, we develop another set of skills that at times can probably be beneficial and at other times dysfunctional. So they're both going to have a pro and a con. What is the good that this monster in the flight response has created? What is the bad? What is the good in the fight? What is the bad? What is even in the freeze? Where is the good and the bad skill set that you developed what's the positives that you can walk away with. But what she wants to say, and this is what we're going to talk about, is when you strip the monster away, and the monster, you defang him, the skill set remains. You have those skills. They are your identity. So without that monster, you are still that person that you didn't think you were. You are still special. You are still needed, loved, smart. It was always there. It was always there because it was created in you for something much larger than our monster. And that's where I really want to end this. She goes on and she gives a couple examples of some people that she spoke with at that event that she was shrinking away from, that was upsetting her. And, you know, the first one she spoke with and said, so where would you be without your monster? And she's like, blob on the couch. You know, if I didn't have my monster driving me, she would not have had the financial success that she has had. And for the other one, if she did not have her monster, she would not have her scapegoat. She didn't call it that, but I see it as her scapegoat, her reason for all her failures. Her monster is the reason why she isn't this. She isn't special. She isn't amazing. She isn't smart because of her monster. And so there she lives in that, and she's able to survive each day knowing that it's not her that's got a problem, but the monster is what's keeping her from these things. She's still okay. So she still found a way to be okay. Except for the blame on the monster. Which that's okay, you know? Kind of. You can't live there forever, but I kind of thought, well, you know what? The devil deserves to have the blame on what a horrible, rotten thing he is, but...
Sure.
Yeah.
I feel like that's often the danger of this kind of thought system, of this kind of way, is that, it becomes our scapegoat. So,
Right.
well, I'm sorry, that's my monster, so you're just going to have to deal with it. Like, you know,
It is what it is.
you know, and there's no, I don't need to grow, you know.
Right.
I know what my monster is now, and so I don't have to do that anymore. Oh, I'm a this on the Myers-Briggs. I'm an FLJRP. I don't know. I don't remember it anymore. But you know, I'm this number on the Enneagram, or I'm, you know, they just name whatever that thing is that they've used to think through what's going on inside them, and that becomes the excuse for behaviors that are inappropriate.
Instead of the tool for growth and change. Right. So, so that brings us to the end of the chapter. So I'm going to lay out the homework.
Okay.
So we're going to go back a few where I made some notes on page 60 where she said, special is the illusory antidote you never needed. What is your illusory antidote? Insert your monster name there. And you might not know your monster name right now. Yeah, we're ignoring that nasty stuff outside. I keep looking up, it's getting thicker and thicker. There's a blizzard blowing in here. My goodness.
It'll stop in 2 minutes.
It will. And the wind will change a different direction. You might not know how to fill in that blank yet. It might take the other homework. Do you need pens? And paper? Do you need paper? It may take a little bit of work this week before you know what to put in that spot. It may take working through the other things that I'm going to list before you have an answer for that spot. And I can't separate these pages. Do you need a pen, Mason?
I think I could do it on here.
You're far more techie than me. Here's some paper.
So what give them to me again?
So finding a name for your monster, What is your illusory antidote that you never needed? What is your monster's name? Trying to name it. And you may not find it this week. That's okay. Doing the other pieces here that I'm going to list will help uncover it. So what is your skill set? Write it down. What skills do you have? As a result of your monster, if you don't know who your monster is yet, just what are your skill sets? You might start to discover who the monster is as you start to look at your skill set. And I think trying to answer the question that she posed, what would you be without your monster? I mean, we know the truth. She's talked to us about that in the chapter, but if we just came to that question without having read any of this in the book, can you go backwards into that time frame and say, ooh, what would I be if I were stripped of my monster? Would I be smart? Is my monster the reason I got straight A's in school? Or was I already gifted with that ability? I just let my monster make me prove it. Do we use our monster as a scapegoat? What are the things that we're scapegoating on the monster? Do we use our monster as a scapegoat? And so what are those things we're scapegoating on him? What destruction or dysfunction has it or is it causing? So it might currently be active right now, running around wreaking havoc, or maybe you've come past that and you're cleaning up the debris from it. So what did it cause in the past? What destruction or dysfunction has it being the monster, or is it causing? You know, when I think about what Kim has said, and I'm not sure if she talks about it later in her book, and again, it's just my outside, you know, looking into what she talks about, you know, how she went and she worked right to the top, earning the top degree in her, or level in her company. And all the other things that she's gone on to do and be very successful at. And I wonder at what cost to her family. You know, what did that cost her? What dysfunction did that create? And maybe she juggled it well. You know, I haven't had the opportunity to interview her children, and I don't remember if she talks personally about that or not. But it's a question I have. So, you know, I tend to resonate with that. I'm a perfectionist at times. Put too many things on my plate. That people pleaser, I can't say no. So what is that, you know, how's that affecting my family? And is that leaving a dysfunction there because I'm busy over here? If the monster were gone, what would remain? So we just kind of talked about that. If you stripped yourself of the monster, that's basically your skill set, but it's more than just, it's what is the skill set from each of the flight, fight, and freeze responses. What remains when the monster's gone? Positive and negative. What are those that remain? Because what I want you to be able to do is see yourself, find that identity without that monster. To start to know you were intrinsically created with purpose without a monster. It was all there from the beginning. Which brings us to some things that we've talked about and brought up in here, the Enneagram. If you're not familiar with it, Josh might be able to post a link for going and reading about it and maybe taking the Enneagram questionnaire and figuring out what number are you. And I found that, he said afterwards, we spoke a little bit after the book discussion, he talked about how our number has come about from a wound in our childhood. Something that was just a real big boom that took place. And being a 2, mine, is being a helper and the need to be needed. And obviously having a divorce when I was under 2 years old and my parents separating. And then my whole childhood, we were very isolated from the rest of our extended family, isolated from my dad. It was just my mom raising us, and she was not very present. So that left a huge hole and desire to be needed. So I found it interesting that is what has also played into the development of this monster. But then I started thinking even further about, 5 love languages. I'm sure we're all familiar. We've heard that one tossed around. There's physical touch. There's the gifts, acts of service, words of affirmation, and quality time. Any of you guess where my love language falls? Quality time. I need time with people. And then I went back and thought, okay, so just reflecting on myself with what my monster is, and thought, well, let's just see what are some of the lies kids believe and adults believe in the book I talked about last week. Let's just laugh at that. And so for kids, it's that I'm not important. That's a lie. Or I'm stupid. Those 2 lies were kind of in the, do I have value? Am I needed? And so there was great scripture to go with that, that you can read to hear God speak to you against that lie. Because that's what we have to do. We have to unwire whatever it is we've believed. We have to rewire a new truth in. And so that's the point that we're going to start moving towards. And so John 15 and 16, and I don't know what chapter, or chapter 1, verse 5 to 16, I don't know, John 15, 16. I wrote it down very early in the morning. Didn't get it all there. So, but he speaks into that. Genesis, I loved this one. Am I stupid? Genesis 1, verse 27, we are created in his image. Well, God is certainly vast in his knowledge. It is infinite, and we are created in that image, and he has downloaded that into us. So, no, I'm not stupid. And I can also find plenty of other stuff to validate. I am not stupid in my past if I want to take time to take a look. But when you get triggered in that emotional moment, you'll start to feel that, believe that, and then you respond, fight, flight, or freeze. And so what we're hoping to do is learn to, instead of any of that, jump outside of it from a third-person view, see and observe the reaction you're having and go, why? Oh, wait a minute, but I can pull from this file and pull this file and know that here is the truth. Here is the truth, and I'm going to choose to live in that truth. So yeah, it was just really great. I found like 10 different places to go and scriptures to go through both books that spoke to that. So I want that to be a resource, and I don't expect you to go out and buy the book. You can throw things. I will look these lies up and I'll text back in the chat area, what are some of the responses God has to say about that lie that is triggering and tripping you up. So it also brought me back to Psalm 139, where we are created and he knows us full well. When we talked about, I read that last week. Something else from when I did this Enneagram conference, the verse when John the Baptist baptizes Jesus, and he brings him up out of the water, and God speaks, and he says, "You are my son, whom I love, and am well pleased." And we can break that down. You are my son. that gives you belonging. And when we have entered into that relationship, we now have our belonging, the thing that we long for, the thing that our amygdala, Amy, the emotional part of our brain, is searching for belonging. You have it. You have it. Whom I love, security. You are loved without a doubt and am well pleased. Significance, value. It is all right there. So Ben Sternke at this conference went on to say, so name the lie, which would be naming our monster.
Yeah.
And then hear the good news. Well, the good news is the truth. It comes from the Bible, which would be that verse. That is some very good news. And believe it. There's the work. That's a choice. Choosing to believe it. Why aren't we believing it? What's stumbling us up on that we aren't believing that? And it is simply how much brain we've given to that monster in our emotional brain. It's how much we've allowed that monster to just wire those neurons to fire like that. And we'll get into some of that too. The pathways, the neurological pathways between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex and how that affects us. So then the final challenge is to rewrite that lie into the truth. So as part of your homework, you've proven it wrong with your skill set, right? You've done plenty of time proving it wrong, so you know it's wrong. So how can you write yourself a new story? Even if it's just one sentence to the beginning of your new story, what can you rewrite to yourself from a loving viewpoint of who you are? Can you find something that God's going to speak into that? Can you find some scripture? And if not, that's where I want to help with that and give you some scripture. If you can't speak kindly into your own self, maybe you can let God. And if all else fails, who do you trust as a friend or a parent, a sibling that can speak against that lie to you? Do you trust them enough to be vulnerable enough to go and say, why am I valuable? Why am I special? Why am I loved? Why am I smart? What do you know about me? Hopefully they don't say, yeah, there's nothing smart there. Nothing's working out there. Let's hope that's not the case. Be kind. Be kind. But
If they say that, it's because they're dealing with their own.
That's right. That's right. They are dealing with their own monster and can't get outside of themselves. What did we read there? We never really have a relationship with anyone else other than ourselves when we are consumed emotionally by keeping up the facade. So if they're swarming around in a boxing ring inside their amygdala with their monster, they're not going to be able to. So you need to choose wisely who you go to. Choose wisely who you ask that, and make sure it's on the right day.
That's true too.
Make sure that they have the emotional capacity to care about that at the moment, and maybe even ask them to think about it. Maybe not answer on the fly where there's pressure. Hey, I'm going through this book discussion. This is my homework assignment from this quirky woman that delivered it, and she wants me to find out how to rewrite this lie I've believed. Here's the lie. What can you tell me that disproves it? And go from there. So I did a lot of talking, discussion, thought. Should I leave some room here for feedback?
The only thing I would say is that we need to define belief as acting as if it were true.
Yes. Yes.
Belief can't just live in your head.
Right.
It has to be embodied. So when we talk about rewiring, and thinking a different way, to think a different way is not enough. We have to act a different way.
Mm-hmm.
To choose to embody that thought in an action. So when we would have fought or fled or frozen, that we would respond differently in that moment than we normally do. That because we choose to because we see this narrative of the monster in motion in our own heads and hearts, and we say, you know what, I'm not obeying that monster today, because it's not true and it's not real, and I'm going to do something different.
So that brings us to another crossroad. So I just gave you some homework that could take all week to have time to reflect.
The rest of our lives.
Yes, yes, but I'm expecting some progress by next week. But then we have another chapter.
Yeah.
And to not have this book draw out 16 weeks or however many, and I've toyed with how is the best to do that. Do we do our homework, come back and talk about the homework, then read the next chapter? Or are we doing this simultaneous? Do we work on that homework? Because it's going to be a process. It's going to be a process throughout this whole book, and then for time to come after that. It's a process. You won't stop. You're going to continue. At least I hope you continue. I hope this is the catalyst that really gets you working. And you may read the book through several times over and find new anecdotes that like, oh, I don't even remember that. Did we even talk about that? So do we work on this homework assignment as well as getting a few pages in a day of the next chapter? And who knows, I think if we do that, what you're starting to read in the next chapter may also help with the homework. Chapter 2 just kind of laid the groundwork for the homework. It's not a super long chapter. There is one chapter here that's really long that I think we'll have to break down. But
I think the next chapter is going to be really important in doing the homework.
in doing the homework,
Because it's, aligning and observing.
right?
This is all the
How it
attuning our
works.
sensitivities to uncovering the activities of the monster. I think it's going to be important.
Okay, so that's what it is.
Personally, that's my
Chapter, the one on the monster tracks, that's going to be a long chapter. That's one we probably will break down. But I think that's what we need to do. I think we need to do the homework simultaneous with reading the next chapter, keep moving forward, and knowing it's a process. If you come with your homework unfinished, it's okay. Because this is a process, as long as you're working towards that. For the perfectionist out there, for the I gotta get the straight A's, I'm not grading. This is your work too.
But if you don't grade, how do we know we did it right?
Because that monster will still be in there, controlling.
That was a joke for the perfectionists. They understood
Yes.
that.
How do we know? Okay.
I think it takes time to be brave to address these issues.
Oh gosh, you are right. It does. And I talked a little bit last week about having to get real honest with yourself. It is going to take a definite level of bravery and honesty to get, yeah. And am I still on?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I wanted to know when you left us that note. You shut that
No,
down.
this
But-
spill is just probably too
Oh,
much to say.
Didn't notice. So yes, there's a level of bravery, honesty and bravery to dig in there, especially if you've really been hiding from that monster and not acknowledging. There's work to do, and that's scary.
It doesn't want to be seen, and it doesn't want to be understood, and it doesn't want to be figured out, because when it's figured out, it'll lose, because it's not real. As soon as we know the truth, that this thing isn't even real, we're free. And this is the last thing that it wants.
Right. Then what's it gonna
So
do?
it's gonna fight. It will. And it'll hide.
And you may experience some rough waters. I feel like this week for myself, as I was trying to reflect on last week and thinking about how this ties in with love languages, how it ties in with the Enneagram, how it, I feel like God provided live examples. I really didn't need that. I didn't need to walk it. I didn't need to walk through it. But it gave me insight. It gave me ways to, homework, things to work on, things to do for myself, for you guys. It helped in that area. But yeah, so don't be surprised if in going through this, that monster is going to hang on tight to not be gotten rid of.
I think one thing that I reflect on going through this, that I have to rely on scripture of who I am in Christ Jesus, and then hearing the message, and Pastor Josh just drilling it week after week, reflecting back of who I am, and that gives comfort to rid the monster from your life.
Truth kills the lie.
So with that, when I wrote a little description at Josh's request, I thought the cover of the book has a great description. He wanted me to write a description to go along with this to post for those that were interested in the book discussion. And so here's my little description. And on here, I talked about going chapter by chapter to discover what childhood lie we have believed about ourselves. And I'll just jump down to my main goal is to rewrite a new truth about who you really are. Perfectly created, perfectly loved, with a perfect purpose and perfect value. He put it all in you. All the desires, all the things that we chase and run after, he put it in you. And then he equipped you. It's in there. It's in there without the monster propelling it. Seeing if we can just learn to operate outside of that propulsion. So, right. Anything else? Thanks for coming. Look forward to next week. Next week's gonna get fun.